Welcome to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere with your host, Chris Parker.
And welcome back to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere. This is Chris Parker, and I'm having a conversation with Jurriaan Kamer, who is an organization designer and transformation coach with The Ready. And we're going to learn about The Ready as well as the book published by that group called Brave New Work. And I'm sure we're going to be talking about Formula X, which is the work that Jurriaan has done on his own about how organizations can perform up to the level, maybe even beyond the level of Formula One racing teams, which is a delightful thing to wrestle with. Jurriaan and I have known each other in the network for a number of years. We were just chatting to try to figure out how our paths first met, and we couldn't remember it, but we knew that the paths had certainly crossed, and I'm just delighted to have Jurriaan here on the conversation. So Jurriaan, can you kick us off with sharing what is it that you do and why do you do what you do?
Yeah, so some people would call me a bureaucracy therapist.
Okay.
I help leaders that want to transform their organizations and transform the way they work to become a faster, more adaptive and human workplace. That's the short version of what I do and why I do it. I think originally it started with me being just fed up with working in the corporate and not being able to achieve what I wanted to achieve. I started in IT, became really curious about new ways of working when I bumped into the Agile Manifesto. And now I really want to unlock agility and adaptivity and increase, human ways of working in the whole organization.
Now, the Agile Manifesto, which I think was signed in 2001, is well, that's a whole other generation ago. And with Formula One, which is not an IT organization, I'm curious, how did this, like when did you first taste the Agile word, and how did that evolve all the way to, I guess, discovering how Formula One has become so agile and so high performing?
Yeah. I mean, so when I started out in IT, I first in a few contracts I helped CIOs to reorganize how they work and how to accelerate speed of digitization of products and software development at scale and all this stuff. I became increasingly interested in the agile world and different work cultures when I was able to visit Spotify a number of years ago. Actually, one of my best friends worked there for about 5 years. So every bunch of months I visited him, and it brought me to barbecues and really got a taste of what is possible. Back then it was still in Stockholm in Sweden, and later on he moved to New York. I also researched and became endless curious, how does Google work on the inside? How does Facebook work on the inside? How does Airbnb scale up and still become innovative? And how do they keep the startup culture alive while growing into a global company? All those questions I had and just did my own research. And it was really relevant because in my work with corporates, I increasingly was unable to actually unlock the agility that I wanted to unlock at a global scale. So I found myself in the room with the CEO talking about the agile movement. And he was like, yeah, it's great that the teams continue to do that. And I'm like, no, actually, the real problem that we're facing here is that the boardroom still does most of their decisions top down, does most of their planning and resource allocation and budgeting on a yearly basis, and they're really trying to control all the way down to the euro what is spending, what has been spent on what, and all this reporting and bureaucracy happening. And that was really in the way of going fast and that. So I started researching other places. I found The Ready 4 years ago as a company that was already doing a lot of this work on the whole organization. So that shifted my attention from what to do in IT to what to do on the whole organization, especially the management layer. How do you set strategy? How do you make decisions better? How do you have good meeting rhythms? How do you set the purpose of a team? Like doing that on a team of teams level is what we do. And then that curiosity never ends. And a couple of years ago, I was asked to join a group of CIOs actually to visit the Red Bull Racing Factory in Milton Keynes. as a speaker originally. Like, could you just warm us up the evening before we go into the factory to talk a little bit about your work? And I was like, yeah, that's great, but maybe this is now the time to really look closely at Formula One through an organization design lens. I was following F1 for a while, just as a Sunday afternoon entertainment, but never really dug deep. And when I was able to dug deep, first during using desk research, and then later on looking in the factory and asking a lot of questions to a lot of people, a lot of stuff that I was thinking, heard about actually got confirmed. So yeah, that I'll stop there for a second.
Well, I love where you're going with it. As I'm having conversations with people in organizations that want to become more agile, in general, meaning velocity and flexibility and flow. Frequently, I point to the same place you did, which is actually leadership, because I think the people on the shop floor are typically super hungry for this, and they're probably adapting some of it anyways, because it just makes sense. What are the symptoms or the pointers that you give to executives to unleash true agility in their organization? You already mentioned budgeting and long-term strategies, but what are the sort of the anti-patterns that need to be addressed to unlock this capability?
Yeah, often I don't really overthink it. When I'm in conversations with them, I ask them literally, like, what is in the way for you to do the best work of your lives? So it's not so much immediately going to teams and planning and resources and projects. It's literally like, just think small first. Like, what if you look only at your own team and your own work? What is in the way? And they already have a list of things that they dread doing. Even boardrooms suffer with bureaucracy, although they often have really good admins that keep them away of that. Like, they are the only people in the organization that have kind of this bureaucracy, people that push the bureaucracy away to them so they can actually do their work. But still, I mean, they face challenges like, I mean, if we have an organization where all the authority is bundled at the top, those people are extremely busy and are extremely, they're over asked to make decisions about things that they don't really have knowledge of and information about, and they feel that pain. They do it every day, but it feels for them also like not a great place. So there's lots to gain for them personally as well. And that's a bit different, I think, from what I often see consultants or coaches inside a company do, where they just bring the problems to the board and like, you should solve this problem for me. But instead, like, be curious and interested in what it might bring to them immediately tomorrow. Like, if they start redesigning their meeting rhythm, if they start rethinking how they make decisions, those are really good examples that can scale outside their boardroom and get in different places.
Yeah, I love it. I love personifying it or making it very human for them. Something I've also seen that works is actually and ask them and say, well, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Which maybe is another question, another dimension of the question. And oftentimes they're saying, well, my roadmap is never achieved.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, interesting. And like, well, I'm not sure if I'm getting the ROI for my investment. Oh, okay. And I think this probably then unlocks some of these tensions or issues. I'm going to go a little off piste here, and is this sort of Spotify way of working or agile way of working or autonomous way of working for everyone? Because I see, for example, in bank organizations who have said they've adopted the Spotify model. However, knowing people in these organizations, it's actually just increased bureaucracy and made things more confusing, it seems. And performance and work joy has actually gone down. It's sometimes it's just shocking how wrong it can go. So is this for everyone, or what's your take on that?
Well, I think that those are two questions. I think so. Is it for everyone? That's the first one. I would say yes. I mean, if you look at our client list, we do this work across industries, across geographies, and across sizes, big or small. We see examples of very progressive organizations also across industries and across geographies, big and small. So it is not industry dependent for sure. And I think in the end, it goes back to the human condition, right? Every person really wants to do something that's meaningful, People want autonomy over their work. People want to make decisions about how to do their work, when to do it, what to do when. And people want to get better at skills, right? If you go back to some of the earlier self-determination theories, or the popular book by Daniel Pink, Drive, he talked about intrinsic motivation and how to unlock it. And it's all about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. If you go back to agile ways of working, or other new ways, or self-organization, or holacracy, or whatever your spiel is, it's mostly about that, like creating a workplace where people can show up, they can decide what they want to do, how they want to energize their talents. They have an environment where they can get better in their work, and they have autonomy over how to do it. And I think if everybody in the end craves that, and somehow, I mean, people are highly intrinsically motivated and engaged in their personal lives. I don't know, when you go on holiday, when you maybe make a movie with your friends, or you do your sports, like we have all this energy. And at workplaces, we kind of forget all that. We put our personalities at the door, and we just follow orders. Like, that's so weird to me. And more people started to realize, and especially when you go to knowledge work, like the old way of working doesn't work. It just doesn't work in complexity. You need to have all the brains engaged with the problem to figure things out and to solve complex things. So that's the first thing. So my answer is yes, it is for everyone. Every industry has their own specifics. Like you talk a little bit about banks. Of course, there are compliance and regulations and rules, but it's also often weaponized as an excuse. Like, we cannot do this because of compliance. But often when we unpack that, we take a look at the actual rules, and we look at what is really not possible. The list is quite small, right? You do have to put stuff in place. Makes sense. You don't want to create, in manufacturing, you don't want to create an accident that costs people's lives. It's just common sense. Of course, you need rules to be able to do it. But within that, there's a whole bunch of freedom to do it the way you want. And then the third thing you touched upon was the Spotify model in certain places. And yeah, I mean, the problem with, and I've written an article about that went viral. The Spotify model is simply a very nice, I would say, a photograph of one organizational idea that's already a couple years old. And especially if you're in the old mindset, you have the tendency to take that as a silver bullet and try to, do it and implement it, and that should solve your problems. But in fact, you're missing the real point here. The whole capability that you need to build in an organization is to continuously experiment and evolve. And some of the clients that I've worked with that have adopted the Spotify model, they're stuck in the Spotify model because it was implemented top down. Now they're doing it. In some parts, it's not working. Surprise, they're another music company that's trying to scale globally. They have a different problem to solve in their products. So yeah, the Spotify model doesn't make sense for them. Some of the trade-offs that are in there might not be for them, but they have no process or no skill or how to actually evolve the model. And I think that is the missing thing there sometimes.
I love that with a Dutch fashion brand that I'm working with, and I think that organization needs some of this autonomous decision making. I decided to introduce the Spotify model there as really as a confidence builder. But when I introduced that to the CEO, I said, "Please don't do this."
Yeah,
we're going to talk about this, and this is what you should not do: is copy this. This should be an inspiration for you to find your way. And and I feel he's really heard that, which is nice. And in that banking, I love what you said about the weaponizing regulation, about not being able to do things.
Yeah,
because having worked in senior roles in Dutch financial services, there's the Dutch National Bank, which is the regulator.
Yeah.
Can be the ECB, the European Central Bank, but let's say Dutch National Bank, and the Dutch National Bank has the regulation of organization and control, the ROC.
Yeah.
And in IT, at least, it's basically a paragraph that says be in control.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then
figure out how to do it. That's up to you. Yeah.
And then there's 15 levels of interpretation.
Yeah.
Like there's one time that I remember that one of the architects came and said, "Well, we must have two different types of firewall because the Dutch National Bank requires
that."
I was like, I guarantee you they don't.
Yeah.
It might still be smart, but don't use that as an argument. It's no, I love it. So if we loop back to the Ready, and you've been very busy, and I want to express my appreciation. Nick Van Summeren, who's a friend and a colleague who was with ABN, now he's with Rabobank. You put a book giveaway on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. Recommend someone. I recommended Nick, and you sent the book to him. So I really appreciate that. Thank you for that. The other book that's there is Brave New Work, and that's The Ready. And so how can The Ready and yourself in that network, practically help organizations move this direction and start this, I guess, this evolution of discovering new ways of working?
Yeah. So we are all about large-scale transformation projects. So if you are a leader, could be C-level, could be just a P&L leader or a founder of a company, and you find yourself in a place of either you're frustrated yourself about the bureaucracy or the lack of output of the system, and you're seeing that it might be caused by the problems that we have, like you have bottlenecks in decision making. Maybe there's a lack of accountability and ownership. Maybe there's an email overload, a meeting overload, and you want to do something about it. We have a really practical way of approaching those problems at scale. So usually we would go in and spend 4 to 8 months inside a company with 2 embedded coaches that would work with the leadership team and the group around it to transform, in the end, like a 500, 1,000 to 2,000 people organization, or at least a chunk of it, and then we can go back and do other stuff. And what we're usually trying to do is we want to create pull in the system. So we have, everybody has these great new practices and frameworks and stuff, but what won't work is if you really want to have a lasting cultural change, you don't want to push that down and implement it top down, because that's basically going from A to B through A, right? You want to go from A to B to B. So start with the end in mind. So we usually start experimentation, start feedback loops, trying new things, trying some of those practices, also acknowledging that some of them might work, some of them might not work for that context, share lessons learned across the system, get a group of people that are extremely enthusiastic about it to adopt it even further, then build momentum. Other people will pull on you, and that's how you create a movement, basically. So it's almost like, it's a bit weird to say it in the pandemic, but it's like viral change in a positive way. That's what you want to create, and that's our approach. So yeah, that's what we're about. And Brave New Work, the book, talks about the operating system canvas, which is the 12 different elements of how you organize. And in that are lots of examples of organizations and principles that are radical and different. And usually when people read the book, like, their heads are being turned upside down of what is possible. But it's also not so theoretical and far away of some of the books that are like, oh, that's a really inspiring example, but it's not for us. But Brave New Work really starts with, okay, what could you do with your team, even if you want to start small?
It seems that this requires some bold thinking or bravery on behalf of a leader. So who is the perfect customer for you? Meaning if the phone rings, says, "Hey, Jurriaan, I've got a problem. Help." What do you hope they say next? Like, my role is, and my mindset is, and my budget is, or my organization is, or whatever.
Hopefully they have read Brave New Work, or some of our articles. We publish a lot of articles. We have a newsletter. So hopefully, and also we have the Brave New Work podcast. So if you're more in podcasting, you could be listening to that too. So hopefully they've already consumed some of our content and are kind of on board with the thinking. We are called the Ready for a reason, right? Sometimes you get a call like, we're sending an RFP to 5 different consultancies. Can you just fill out this form and tell us how you can help us? And then usually we're like, that doesn't sound like you're really, really on board and really ready for the kind of change we are bringing, which is different from other change. So yeah, having that mindset of really understanding what needs to happen in the sense of, we cannot do this. And so, like Marshall Goldman's book, like what got you here won't get you there. Like that really level of understanding that we need to try something really different. And maybe you've already experimented with things and it didn't work. Usually we want to talk to a P&L leader that cares enough about their business problems that they need a new operating system or a transformation to achieve it, or even higher up in the chain. That's also good. A place to start. So usually a team of teams. So ranging from 100 people to 500 people or even more, where you can, like, we have we're being contracted by the team or the leader that has the control over that and is really able to make some meaningful change.
I like it. Again, I think we have very similar DNA. So I would be surprised if we're going to disagree violently in this conversation, maybe.
Yeah.
But for those in the Netherlands, the ready.nl, and about midway through that page in Dutch, and if you're not Dutch speaking, you can Google Translate it in Chrome.
Or go to ready.com if you're outside of the Netherlands. Yeah.
Also true. Yeah. And then there's a lovely list in there of only those who are ready. And it's like, make purpose-driven decisions low in the organization, give everyone the freedom to choose when, where, and how they work, make almost all information transparent and accessible, manage continuously and omit annual budgets and plans. Mm-hmm. Let's stick on that for a while. So, well, how do you run a business without budgets and plans? I say sort of facetiously, but I'm curious, because that's a lovely place to start.
Yeah. No, I can kind of, funny enough, I could ask you the question, like, how would you do it? But you probably have interesting answers too. I think it starts with acknowledging that the current way of doing that and approaching that actually is holding the organization back, and gets all sorts of side effects of hoarding money, spending it because otherwise we won't have it next year. Like all those really bad behaviors that you want, and then not having the budget available for the moment you actually need it, or some kind of opportunity comes up and you're unable to quickly get the resources to get that done. Like that is the problem here. And we probably all agree on that, but we haven't, like, not a lot of companies have really thrown that out of the window or got a new way of working. There's this really good community called Beyond Budgeting, which has a couple of books, a couple of talks out there. So that's a good place to start when you're interested in that, in the financials of it. But in the end, the whole purpose is to do continuous steering, right? Is to allocate money when we need it, and to have a process that's fast and isn't based on the idea that we can actually predict the future 1 year ahead, because we all know that that's not true.
Well, I guess we can predict that we can't predict it, So if these predictors, sort of, ate their own dog food, they realize that, it's the fact that it'll be different is the only certainty.
Yeah.
So to answer the question you didn't ask me, meaning, and I would have gone to the same place actually, Beyond Budgeting, and that's for more the financial thing and that continuous planning perspective. And for me, the mindset is to on as short a period as possible, commit resource that's available to be adapting constantly, as opposed to project-based, business case-based, which then tears the fabric of humanity apart because it never works. Yeah. And so I think if you're saying, okay, well, this is the team for that period of time, give them the tools they need for that period of time, let them know that they will be able to work that way for the next quarter or whatever. Yeah. And then we'll come back. And then they should tell us how they want to change. And then maybe the context has changed. And so, and then we have that conversation and we reset, hopefully slightly, and then repeat, rinse and repeat. So it's, a typical MBA students, I think, will wrestle with this and struggle with this, because this is the exact opposite from what we were taught.
Although, it's true. And although if you talk to them, like if you are in a team, and imagine being in a team, cross-functional team, you have a group of really talented people, and you're given a mission or some kind of purpose that you're after, purpose for existence, and some kind of outcome that somebody else wants you to drive, or even better, you can pick your own outcome that you feel is most valuable. Like how great is that? Do you then need a project manager? Actually, do you need that? Like if you really can focus on that, do you need to have a 5-year plan? No. Can you just focus on the next 30 to 60 days and make a plan how to do that? And then, go back and learn and try something else. If you would for example, plan global travel trip. How do you call it? Like if you go on a world tour, world holiday, I know there's a better word for it. You would probably not book all the nights in advance, and you would also continuously steer. So it's about bringing some common sense back into it, and trusting humans that they can self-manage and self-organize when necessary.
Trust.
Yeah.
How much of your, because you mentioned that you would embed coaches for a period of months to start the experimentation. How much of your focus or how do you create or make the space for that organizational trust? Because a lot of the dysfunctional bureaucracy that we see is based on lack of trust.
Yeah.
Is that the core of this, or how do you see trust playing in the story?
Well, it's everywhere. It's good to acknowledge it at first, like acknowledge why a certain process exists, right? Was it created because what do we actually believe about the people in the system? Do we believe they need to be controlled? Sometimes we talk about the metaphor of the traffic light intersection versus a roundabout, right? Those are two different operating systems trying to solve the same problem, but one of the two trusts the people that they're able to self-manage, and the other one believes that we need to tell people what to do. And both could work, and different situations require either one of them. But on average, like the system where we have trust in the people and self-managed, like the roundabout, has vastly better outcomes, vastly better numbers, flow, throughput, and a reduced accident. So, and cost is also less. So usually we have that conversation really early on with leaders, and intuitively they all know that if we trust people, it's a good idea. But if you're stuck in a system where you reinforce the idea that we need to have a plan, we need to have somebody to tell others what to do, then you cannot get out of it. So usually some of the work is about connecting leaders to people that are doing the work, right? Often those layers of the organization don't even talk to each other. Like they're talking through each other through reports and through PowerPoints that are managed upwards, and then orders sending up downwards. But have they ever actually spent time, an hour, talking to that team? Like that's part of the work as well. Like you have a bunch of good teams, let the leaders be there and listen to them and be curious and give feedback and have a conversation at least. And that's what builds trust, right? If you talk to leaders in the system, they're like, yeah, we don't got the right people. But if you talk to the people in the system, like, oh, those leaders, they don't get it. But they've never actually talked to each other. And in the end, it's the operating system that's the problem. It's not the people or the leaders.
One of the points that I picked up in a list of 7 things, and I think it was on a blog post, I think coming from the Formula X book. But number 2 was share context and enhance information flow through regular, interactive, all hands meetings. And I think this is a tactic that you're referring to here, which is, again, create the space for engagement and interaction in discovery. Is that?
Yeah, I always say that's almost the other way around. It's also good, right? So in that case, we're talking about making leaders more accessible and making explicit ceremonies or sessions where leaders are available to answer any questions and where leaders set context. And that's basically going beyond, like the traditional way is that there's a new strategy and then it's been sent to only the top level managers, and the top level managers, they then send it to their middle managers, and the middle managers then go to their teams and share it. And there's no line upward. So if there's any question, like, I really don't understand priority number 5, can you kind of tell me in layman's terms what it would mean for me personally, because I don't get it. Right? That's often the case when top-down directives come in. People on the work floor, they try to make sense of it, and 80% they just throw away in their minds because they cannot really relate to it. In this case, you make it what you see in companies like Spotify and Facebook and other places, they have these weekly or bi-weekly all hands meetings where the people actually vote democratically what are the questions that we're going to put in front of these leaders this week. So they try to make it as relevant of what's going on, and leaders share kind of endlessly strategy, priorities, focus, because they understand that if we have autonomous teams, the only way for them to really align to, like, if you're managing a whole group of speedboats, right? The only way for all those speedboats to go in the same direction is to have this context and to set the context so that the teams can then self-manage towards the right direction. Even over having lots of control layers and management layers, you just don't need it anymore if you're doing the other thing well.
Yeah, I love it. And something that I like to recommend when talking about these things is there a way to actually include a customer? Meaning, so it's not only is it the executive
of course,
who's developed a strategy to serve the customer, but then actually bring the customer in.
Yeah.
And which is, sometimes even more powerful, because if the customer says, I'm suffering because, or I'm trying to achieve and I want your help in order to, then everyone's sort of like, whoop, like, oh, wow.
Yeah, this is real now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This is really happening.
Yeah.
Couple of practical questions that in Spotify and Agile land, I think there might be, at least not that I know of, say, sacred rules. We're talking about like cross-functional autonomous teams. What is the role of line management in that, like the human people management perspective?
Yeah,
I see it done differently in different places, and it never really quite works, because it's almost of a matrix thing. But on one hand, humans seem to want to know where they report to, and on the other hand, they want to, well,
they want to know how they get. They want to know how they can progress.
Yeah.
In money wise, mastery wise, that's for sure. And they want to have some safety, that they know that they are valued and appreciated. But I don't necessarily know that needs to come from a line manager. So I think that's an old concept that we have to unpack. And for example, at the Ready, we are 25 people. There are no managers in our company. Like we have processes that are participatory, that gives us career progression, mastery, onboarding, offboarding, hiring. That could be self-managed as well. But that we are radical laboratory for those things. However, I've seen this in other places as well, where, for example, at Schiphol Airport, at one point in time, there was one department in IT that were actually, I think they had 50 or 60 people. We're talking about 10 different teams, and there was only one line manager. And the only thing the line manager did was keep away, protect this bubble inside this bureaucratic system so that it wasn't taken apart. And within that, there were peer reviews, like there were peer feedback sessions. People gave each other feedback, and that feeded into the HR cycle of salary progression, all those things. They hired their own colleagues. All of those things happen there.
I think the thing that's coming to my mind is when trouble happens, and I'm thinking of a particular team right now that, in the case of poor performance and maybe lack of a safe space where the colleagues are able to really truly give each other that feedback.
Yeah.
In that case, what I'm looking for there is like, okay, well, and another statement that you've used that I love is that sort of working on instead of in that organization.
Yeah.
And so who's the person who's abstracted from the workflow that says that person is drowning, and they need care, and that's the ideally that should be within the team. And I would love it if there was maybe another sort of catch-all person to just be monitoring to see, okay, who needs help. Yeah. And that is the I think that's more the dimension that I'm curious about.
Yeah. So in that case, that could be a manager. But again, let's unpack what manager means and what are the different roles that the manager is holding. There's another company out there, Schuberg Phyllis, 300 people, maybe even bigger these days, fully self-managed, no managers, and they have a system of coaches. So every person in the company has a coach or that they have a relationship with, and they talk about HR issues or performance issues or challenges, conflicts in their teams. And those coaches are other colleagues that just have this coach role, that put themselves on an internal coach marketplace. Like, hey, I'm available as a coach. I've been trained. I'm available as a coach. And if you want to, I'm available. So if you want me as a coach, you can get me. So it's also like two-way marketplace, which has the advantage of maybe there's a coach that's not doing it well, or maybe the coach is not connecting with anyone. Well, that person won't have any coachees. That's fine. But there's some other coaches that are popular. Like, what are they doing? So this group of colleagues, they just help each other out. And usually the coaches are not in the team they're working in. So just to open up your mind, and also the mind of the listeners to defaulting to the manager should do that. I think is a bit, 1980. Let's think about what else we could do.
Yeah, I love the 80s. The 80s was maybe
That's true.
one of the best decades ever.
There was no email in the 80s.
Woo! So it's well, yeah, I think that I love it, and I think with this organization I'm working with is we've already sort of peeled back that onion to say, well, this sort of the reporting hierarchy of manager, no, don't do that. As far as the career progression, no, that shouldn't necessarily go there. As far as creating the space for that healthy interaction, okay, well, let's create that in the team space.
Yeah.
And then the one thing that we sort of ended up on is in what we were thinking about doing is for the country organization, just have that one person, like Skipple example, just to have this loose line to everyone, maybe these little safety connections for everyone. But maybe a coaching approach could be different, because we're also not sure if being that safety manager would be really fun for anyone, because you don't have really any authority. You don't, there's no mandate there. You're just taking care of people. Yeah. And then maybe if there's a way of, so I love it. Love the inspiration.
Yeah.
So.
And then because you're being coached by a colleague, you're not talking to someone who has a different level in the organization. The safety actually goes up, because maybe I don't want to be vulnerable in front of my manager, because then maybe the manager will think less of me, which is part of the dynamic of working in a hierarchical organization. Like, how much safety do I actually have with my manager, while they also have control over my destiny and my career progression? So that's all part of it.
That's all part of it. And are these also points that some of these maybe non-traditional approaches that are in the Brave New Work book?
Yeah, Brave New Work is full of that, full of companies that maybe people have self-set salaries. We have examples in there of companies where the CEO is elected by the team. There's lots of radical ideas out there. And you don't need to be that radical if you want to make a change in your organization. You can start small and start thinking of new principles.
Love it. Jurriaan, we need to wrap up, sadly. I was really looking forward to this conversation, and you certainly did not disappoint, because I think we're cut very much from the same cloth. In the show notes for people, you can find Jurriaan at jurriaankamer.com. That's where if you want to see what he's doing himself. I'll put links to the book, and the book can be found at formula-x.co. And the ready.nl in the Netherlands, and the ready.com everywhere else. And you can find more information on that. There's videos, there's blog posts. There's a podcast I had not seen, but I'm going to go find that. So there's a lot of information there. And if you are ready, then maybe give Jurriaan a call. Jurriaan, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player, and download the Simplicity Kit from ebullient.com.